I had a near-death experience in December of 2012. That was a long journey leading up to that experience. Predominantly, what caused my system to shut down was very significant trauma that happened in 2004. As a background, my dear husband was a brilliant medical doctor. And he started out as an OBGYN and then had a chainsaw accident and severed one of his fingers and had a significant nerve damage. So he could no longer do laparoscopic surgery and deliver babies. And so he transitioned into more of a general practice. And when he was going through this, a lot of his medical training, he himself developed stage 4 malignant melanoma. And he was given 6 weeks to live. He had 4 lesions on his spine, 3 on his brain, and he pretty much had a death sentence. But something in him knew that he wasn't going to die, and he literally got on his knees and prayed. And in a prayer, he heard the word Hulda Clark, who was a woman who wrote the book, The Cure for All Cancers, and Cure for All of the Advanced Cancers. Well, that didn't go well in the United States. She obviously had to move to Mexico, but Scott is my husband, and he was able to reach out to this woman many years ago and learned how to heal himself using parasite cleanses and antifungals and detox programs. And also he was counseled to move out of environments that were very toxic for him. At the time, he was in his previous marriage. It was before me, but that was a very toxic marriage. And instead of dying, he actually lost 40 pounds, had gained greater vitality, and did very well. And he did a full recovery, and he never had it coming back. Well, all of his not only his patients, but his staff was like, "What are you doing? This is amazing." And so he started researching more about the benefits of doing these various protocols, and started doing some chelation therapy and all of that work in his medical practice. Well, that didn't really go well with the big pharma. And so my husband, moving forward, we had married, we had a 1-year-old, and I was 11 weeks pregnant with our youngest when 6 U.S. Marshals entered our business and handcuffed and shackled my husband in front of me. And they he was set up for medical billing fraud. And we thought it would be such an open and shut case because it was so easy to prove whether someone who did billing, and there was no evidence that he committed any fraud, and he was just such a spiritual man that it was such an incredibly taxing journey. Well, from my perspective, my husband was in prison for 5 months for a crime he didn't commit. Came out, all they wanted was his medical license because they didn't want him to be a threat. He was reprimanded by not doing enough pharmaceuticals, not doing enough procedures, not doing enough exploratory, although he never caused harm to a patient. And he ended up having a nearly $300,000 fine, and he had to relinquish his medical license, and years and years of fighting this battle. So in my world, my sense of safety was so absolutely removed. I lived in a constant state of sympathetic stress response. I was so level high anxiety, and I could describe the sensations that I was feeling like gut rot in my gut 24 hours a day. And I felt like I was being eaten from the inside out. We just had so much stress and anxiety just trying to navigate such a horrific experience. And it started showing evidence in our bodies. Both of us started to have some serious breakdown, digestive issues. And anyone who has studied the response of how stress affects our body, obviously brain dysregulation, you get forgetfulness, you're just on high alert. And when you're in a sympathetic response, all of your system is activated at all times, all of your sensory activation, and the gut takes quite a hit. It changes the chemical balance. So we literally traveled the world trying to heal energetically, and we met with practitioners. We went to Peru, did ayahuasca. We went to Europe. We did like sound baths. We did ordered yagyas in Tibet for chants from monks, prayer circles, and we did so much. We wanted to heal. But not only did I not heal, I kept breaking down. And so in December of that year, my system, I was just chronically nauseous, and I would shake all the time. And I took a turn for the worse, where I was shaking violently. I'd lay on my bed, and it would start about 10 a.m., and I would shake so violently that my legs would move like at this intensity, to the point where my young children had to like lay on my legs so that I wouldn't fall off the bed. I became so weak that I couldn't speak. I would have convulsion. I would have these muscle spasms that were so almost like seizures, that were so intense in my gut. My whole body would just like thrust for hours and hours, and even my eyelashes ached. I was just so exhausted and in so much pain. And the way I would describe the pain level on a 0 to 10 level, it was a 27. I was in excruciating pain. And although my husband was no longer a medical doctor, he was very, very well schooled in the medical field, and he was a little hesitant to take me to the ER, knowing that they wouldn't do much more than what he was addressing at home. But I was very frightened that I was actually going to die. And so I told him to please take me to the emergency room, which he did. And I was there for about 5 hours, and they ran a bunch of tests, and I don't know if they felt like I was a drug addict trying to get meds, or whether there was, hypochondriac, but it was so much evidence that I was in such a peril state. And so they just said it was gastritis and sent me home. And I felt so deflated because I was so desperate for some help. I didn't even get anything for the pain or the nausea. And at this point, I had developed severe food allergies, where I was severely reactive to over 500 foods. So it was just a full-time job navigating my whole system. I then, the following night, my whole system continued. The following evening, it was 6:52 p.m. and I was alone in my bed. When I would be in bed, just because there's so many parts of my system that was off, I would have a heating pad on the highest level and have the pad cover completely exposed to have direct contact to the skin. I would get large burns on my stomach, but it was better to soothe the outside versus the pain that was I feeling internally. I would be layered in flannel pajamas and 3 comforters, and still I felt like I was in a meat locker. And so I was alone in bed. At some point, there was a sense of something, and I was awake, and I saw that my whole room started to glow. It had kind of a soft, warm glow, and so I was a little bit inquisitive and just observing this glow taking over in my room. And then suddenly there was a little bit of a pull from my core, and I didn't feel myself leave my body, but then suddenly I was standing at the foot of my bed staring at my body. And I glanced over at the clock and saw that it said 6:52. I think this mom brain that I have, just always checking to see what time is my child going to need me. So I glanced at the clock and I glanced at the body that was in the bed, and I was obviously me. However, my hair I could see was very, very disheveled from restlessness. So my hair was kind of matted down. I could see the comforter pulled up around my neck, and I could see my face had a contorted tense due to the pain. So I was observing that and immediately felt an enormous amount of compassion for that individual that was in bed and how hard she struggled. And it really pulled me to just acknowledge some of us go through some pretty hard challenges. So as I was watching my body in bed, I suddenly heard my husband's sound of his voice where he was laughing down the hall. He was watching television and he was watching The Simpsons, which he was watching it with our two young girls who at this point were now 7 and 9. And so immediately I was moved from the bed to standing in the living room watching my family, and I could see my young daughter was playing on the floor with some toys. The other daughter was curled up on the couch with her father, and they were watching television. And I was so aware of the thoughts they were having. I was aware of everything about them, but knew that they had no awareness that I was in the room. And I was just feeling so much love for them and a presence that I just wanted to be there with them. But that ended very quickly because and I don't know what was the catalyst for this, but suddenly I was on a very large pathway. And the pathway was very well marked. And at the very top of the pathway was this large rock, and my husband was sitting on that rock. He had our youngest sitting in his lap, and then my children were our other children were wrapped around him. So I made eye contact with my husband Scott first, and I looked at him, and I could see he was crying, and he said, "It's okay, babe. I love you, and I will be okay." And I was so confused because I was thinking, okay, with what? I'm not okay. Why are we here? What's happening? So I was very confused. So I turned my attention to my oldest daughter. She was crying. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be okay." And then my next daughter, "I will be okay too." And then my son, he nodded, "I will be okay." And then I turned to my daughter who was 9, and she just said, I love you, Mommy. I love you, Mommy. And then turned her head into her older sister and was sobbing. And then I saw my youngest, and she was so paralyzed by it. She just had this shock in her system and then buried her head into her dad's chest. And I wanted to say, "I'm not going anywhere." I wanted to say, "I'm right here, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening, but I'm here." But there was a force moving me away from my family and into the unknown. And as I was moving down this pathway, my parents, my siblings, close friends were all there, and behind them were my aunts and uncles and cousins and people that I interacted with. And I was becoming aware that nearly every person who would be impacted by me crossing over was there to tell me that they would be okay without me. Even my mom didn't beg me to stay. There was sadness, but nobody asked me to stay. Nobody told me I would be missed. Everyone just said, "I will be okay." And I was still, and I knew that I wasn't walking, but there was a movement. I was moving. So before me was this large building that was like black spires on the roof. It would be what we would assume the archetype of a haunted mansion that we would see in the movies. Sharp spires on the roof, ravens staring down, black, dilapidated yard. The wrought iron gate was completely broken. The fence was kind of toppled over. There was a tree that was dead in the yard. The grass was completely yellow. The bushes were all dead. Windows were hanging. It was just very, very classic, dilapidated, dark, heavy energy. Now, as an individual, I don't like anything scary. I refuse to go to haunted mansions. I refuse to watch scary movies. My system can never handle that. But I wasn't frightened. I was just, as I was going through the threshold, there was just this inquisitive nature. And as soon as I stepped through the threshold of the gate, all of a sudden, instantaneously, everything transformed. So the sharp black spires turned into a white golden dome. The ravens turned into white doves. The tree became very vibrant with beautiful flowers on its tree. The gate adjusted and it became very beautiful. And I could hear music and life and love emanating from every blade of grass. Everything was just so alive and beautiful and welcoming, and I could feel love emanating from the building itself. So I moved forward, went through the threshold of the building, and was met by 3 illuminated beings of light. And they were so brilliant, with so much brilliant light, that I couldn't differentiate one from the other, although there was a primary one that was the spokesperson, and then there were 2 behind that individual. And they were greeting me at the door. They said that I was crossing over due to severe trauma that has broken down the physical body. So it was a severe trauma that forced me to leave my body. I was still connected to that body via the cord of life, that there are many, many layers of the human existence. We're very, as humans, we're not really aware of the many layers, but there's obviously the physical level, and many people would agree that we have a spiritual self on the other side, but there's also the astral body and the emotional body and the mental body and the etheric body. So all of these different bodies that are part of the matrix of who we are. And so I was told that I was still connected to that, and that pathway was a representation of my journey home, and to show me that there was impact with me not being there, although no one stopped me because none of their consciousness was prepared for me to go. At that point, 3 more beings of light entered the room. 2 of them walked in front, and then as soon as I looked over at them, there was a 3rd one that was carrying a large crystal bowl of water with a soft crystal sponge. So the water was crystal, the sponge was a soft crystal, the bowl was this crystal bowl. And as I watched them, I looked down, and my whole form dropped off of me. So my body looked like a crumpled up outfit on the floor that was completely discarded without any form or structure, but I could see that it was my body, and I could look down and I looked like them. I had that same illuminated light. And the 2 that walked in picked up my discarded shell of my body. Well, the 3rd one started bathing that body with this crystal water. And they were telling me that it was severely damaged, and they were working on repairing that level. And once they were complete, while they were still working on that, the original 3 started to walk me forward. And in this area where they walked me, there were 3 large statues, and they were approximately 15 to 17 feet tall, very ornate, gold, precious gems, very, very beautiful statues. The first one was the most illuminated, and it had the most gems to it. Although the other ones were still present, there was a little bit more of a shadowing, so I couldn't see the details as well on that. Behind that was a darkened pathway, and they told me that if I were to cross into that pathway beyond those statues, that was the point of no return, and I would not be returning home to my family. And so they cautioned me not to proceed. They then showed me these statues and said I was being given 3 gifts, and the first gift was the gift of sight. So I assumed my 3 gifts were representative to those statues, although that wasn't clarified for me. And at that moment when they said the first one is a gift of sight, immediately I saw probably 120 videos playing simultaneously all around me. None of them were a life review for me. However, they were all of my family living their lives, how they would live their lives without me. And I saw many, many details about that. That my oldest daughter moved home to help take care of her sisters, that she didn't end up marrying the man that she was supposed to marry. I saw how my family were in a lot of grieving. They tried to connect with my husband, and he isolated himself. But once I got to my youngest daughter, they said she was mute and had regressed quite significantly. And they told me that she had a very valuable path on this planet in this lifetime, but she would not live her life purpose without me there. And that was made very, very clear. And so I turned to them and I said, I have to go back. Sophie needs me. And instantaneously, I was back in my body and back in immense pain. I saw that 8 minutes had passed, and I knew that my husband would be coming in shortly with the girls to do a family prayer that was a ritual that we maintained every day. And so I laid there and I just kept touching my body. God, please let me live. God, please let me live. God, please let me live. And at this point, like I mentioned, I really couldn't speak very well. I apparently, from my family's input, when I felt like I was yelling, it was very garbled, very soft, and they put their ear right to my mouth, and they couldn't understand anything that I was communicating, and I would try to spit out a sentence, and it was so exhausting. It would knock me out for a couple of hours, so that was futile. But my husband circled with the girls shortly after, and my youngest was up at my right ear. She was right here beside me, and then my husband and my other daughter, and he held hands with them and asked God to protect me and that we have healing, and asked for us to feel love and support, and the very typical prayer. And he finished his prayer, and my young daughter, she leaned her head into my ear, and for the first time she leaned in and she whispered, I need you, Mommy. And I wanted to say, I know, I'm not going anywhere. I couldn't respond to that, but I could feel the warmth. I could feel her heart. I could feel how much she really did need me. And I just quietly did a prayer internally saying, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here for you, as I felt tears stream and fill up my pool in my ears. How this came around is I was bedridden for an additional 8 months. It was a very, very, very long journey. I wouldn't say that I'm even healed today, although I've made some enormous strides. It's been way more than I could describe, but I've learned a significant amount in that journey.
So, wow, first of all, I mean, it's an impressive account of the experience that you've had on the other side, but I think what stays with me the most is your journey of healing and the way that you've been able to make such a recovery given the state that you were in. Could you tell us a bit more about what that process of healing your body has looked like in the weeks and months that followed?
Yes, primarily I knew I needed to heal and repair my gut. I'm very well aware of the gut-brain axis and how when one of them is off, the other one is off, and inflammation in one can cause a lot of dysregulation in the other. So that was primary. Not to be too graphic, but everything I ate exited my body exactly how I swallowed it. So I wasn't digesting anything. Nothing was being digested or processed. So I was becoming very nutrient deficient. And so what I started with was bone broth. I became good friends with someone who was a master in traditional food preparation, and she taught me everything about bone broth. And so I pretty much sustained life on the bone broth. And why that was so wonderful is because of the high amino acid content. It helps heal and seal the gut lining. It also helps pull toxins off of the villi to help them repair. It's the most bioavailable and very easy to digest, which with the high nutrient content. So that was really wonderful. Many times my mom would cook down some rice and then put it in a blender and have to just spoon feed it. I didn't have the strength to lift up my own head, but these very soft, gentle things that I could digest and to get a little bit of strength. Meditation, mindfulness practice just to help calm the nervous system, breathing techniques, massage when I could, anything, and rest was so primary. So anything to help calm the nervous system, because you can't heal in a sympathetic response. So your brain and body is primed to run, fight, or hide. And it's not the time to digest. It's not the time to heal and recover. It's not the time to create a baby if you're wanting to become pregnant. It's the time to survive. And so I needed to do everything that I could to stay in a sympathetic response as much as possible, which means I couldn't watch anything that would, I couldn't watch any news, any movies of intensity. I couldn't listen to music that had intensity. Everything had to be very, very, very gentle. And I journaled when I could. I spent time with loved ones. I felt like there was a few times where that my family would gather and someone would be in this dialogue and they would crack some jokes, and I found myself laughing, and I felt like when I would laugh that the pain would dissipate somewhat. So I just kept very aware of those elements that helped supported it. But I also worked really hard on understanding how our thoughts and our emotions and our internal visualization and the way we speak about our world, all of those are elements that create energy, or at least move energy. And so I wanted to get very, very dialed in. I knew that my healing was up to me.
That's very true, and I think it's a very important part of the healing process that we take responsibility, because nowadays I think most of us, what we do is we place that responsibility in the hand of our doctors. We say, well, this is what's wrong with me, you go and fix it. And we expect, a laundry list of pills to take, and then it should all be fine. And I think accepting responsibility, but also being open to various ways of healing and trying them out and seeing if that's something that works for you, I think is very important when we find ourselves in situations like you have, where Western medicine, it didn't have enough of the answers for you.
Correct. And yes, I'm very observant of our Western world, and I don't like the word conspiracy theorist. I don't like that because it has such a negative tone. However, if someone started to research about how our country is ran and owned by big pharma, how the medical industry, how so many people, half of all bankruptcies are medical bills, how when we look around there's so much obesity, so much diabetes and heart disease and cancer that are always growing and growing. We have more injections than ever before. There's a lot that is coming at us, and we have not adapted in this very small window of time. Let's say the last 50 years or even the last 100 years, our bodies have not adapted to that. And our water is being, there's toxins in our water, there's toxins in our food, there's toxins in our air, and we have to be very, very vigilant. And for the average person they're fueling their body in the same place that they're fueling their car, chances are they're not getting the nutrients that they need. And we live in a world that's very convenience-based, and we want instant gratification. We're pushing ourselves in a very stressful state. We have all adapted in that level to constant micromanaging on our cell phones. The average person picks up their cell phone within 6 minutes of waking up. So we're starting the day in a dysregulated state. We immediately start scrolling through different apps and getting on social media and seeing things that can dysregulate us very quickly. And that amps up when we get out in traffic. It amps up when we have a meeting with our boss. It amps up when we get home with our children. And there's really little time to give the body a chance to catch up. And so lifestyle changes are what we all have to be accountable for. And most diseases, most illness, most breakdowns of the body are going to be lifestyle based primarily.
Very true. Now, one of the things I wrote down as you were talking was that you mentioned that the intense trauma that you went through was breaking down your body, and it was causing you to live so much in this fight or flight response, which was actively breaking down every organ, every pathway in your body. Now, for anybody that has survived intense trauma or has gone through it and is maybe still in the midst of it, what are the first steps to beginning to heal or to find a path forward?
Right. So I remember being in middle school maybe, and in a health class, and they were talking about stress. And I think many of us have heard that statement, stress kills. And that did not make sense to me. I was like, how does stress kill somebody? But when I started researching that and the effects of stress, one thing that we all have to kind of create as a baseline is our gene expression will either upregulate or downregulate depending on our environment, depending on the stress that we're putting on in our body, that our nutrients that we're bringing in, chemicals, any of these traumatic experiences, they will either turn on a stress response and turn on inflammation, or turn on a breakdown, or even can activate or turn on a gene expression that has a propensity for disease. And or if you are in a very calm state and you spend time in nature, you listen to gentle music, meditate for a few moments, just ground yourself into the body, come back into the body, because we don't realize how many times we try to leave the body. Our energy tries to leave the body. And I realized that was going on for me. I was in so much physical pain. I wanted to get out of there. But I had these moments of awareness that no matter what I did, I had to witness my body. My body didn't have a choice. My body had to ride this train for the length and the duration that it was going to. My spirit didn't want to, but my body didn't have a choice. And so I think the primary thing is to take stock in where you are now. What is causing that? Have some reflection about some of your history. The ACEs score from childhood events is a really good place to start, because there's a lot of evidence that birth trauma and even trauma in the womb can happen. There's much more that's coming to evidence about a baby who didn't feel wanted, or there was fighting in the energy. That starts to set that up. And in the last trimester of that pregnancy, we are so well designed to survive in this world that last trimester is setting the baby's brain up to survive in the world that they're coming into. And so if the mother is in a war-torn area, or in a place of famine, or in a very violent environment, or a impoverished environment, that's all downloading into that baby's brain, preparing that baby to survive in that outer world. And so when we give ourselves permission, not from a space of blame, because I truly do believe everyone does the best they can with the resources and information that they have. We all have a different level of capacity. But look into your past and see what contributed to where you are today. Take a very honest look on how you're regulating your system, what you're engaging in, and remove what isn't healthy. I mean, the starting point, remove toxins. There's so many toxins in our makeup, in our personal care, there's in our cleaning products. The first thing I would say get rid of is dryer sheets. We smell that volatile compound, but it's a lot of toxins in our body. Buy organic food as much as you can. Wash your food. Drink clean water, and make sure that the time you spend with others is going to be healthy and supportive nature, rather than a combative nature. And if it's not supportive, find a way to be in a different environment as you can. Resources get very depleted after you spend many years trying to find doctors and different specialists. But reach out to those who have done that before, who walked that path before. That's why I wrote my book that we'll discuss in a moment, because I felt like I needed so much support that I didn't have access to. And when you're sick and weak and in so much pain and so overwhelmed by your own journey, it's really hard to be your own advocate. So having someone available as an advocate would be very supportive, and then lean into that. It may have taken many years, or it may have been a single incident that moved you into that traumatic experience. So the big T trauma is an assault, a car accident, death of a loved one. Small T trauma is a boss that says things that are cruel, a neighbor who infringes on your personal space, a spouse who constantly belittles you. So all of those things can really add up. But when we take stock of where we are, and it's healthy, I think it's healthy to journal about it rather than keep it up. It becomes a ping pong ball bouncing through your head. But spend some quiet time every day reflecting, and then not only reflect a little bit on where you were and how you are now, but put a lot of attention on where you want to go. And where do you see yourself maybe in a week, maybe in a month, maybe 5 years? And what is that image? Because if you close your eyes and say, where do I see myself in 5 years? If it's bedridden with more medications on life support, you're sending signals that your body's not going to make it. And that every person has to be accountable for their journey.
Very true. Now, you've mentioned your book. Why did you feel the need to write this book? And my second question would be, who is this book for?
I felt so. This is my book. It's called The Secret to Healing and Recovery, and I wrote this book because I knew that I was not the only one in my circumstances. Were not the only one that I was struggling. And I spent so many years trying to learn to heal, trying to navigate such a vast area that I felt like for me to overcome this, I felt like it was my job to, I feel like we're all on the highway of life, and there's going to be whatever job you want to do, or career, or skill that you want to develop, or in any aspect of your life, even as a new mother, or as a new spouse, or a new accountant, or somebody who wants to take flying lessons. There's always going to be somebody who's done it before you, and there's always going to be somebody behind us. And I think as part of the human condition, we have a responsibility to look out for those who are coming behind us and glean wisdom from those who are in front of us. And it's much more, there's a very big difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is something that we can go on Dr. Google, and we can have infinite access to any question we want. That's knowledge. Wisdom is somebody who has walked that path before you. Wisdom is someone who knows it and has had boots on the ground. It's different than reading. You could read a child development book, or you can visit with a mother with 3 young children and they're sick with the flu. They're going to have very different wisdom to share and insight. Spend the time with someone who has the wisdom. And so who I wrote this book for was ideally, it's for everyone, because the healing and recovery isn't only from physical breakdown. It's also for mental and emotional support, spiritual support. It's also for recovery from addiction. It's also, but primarily it's on the healing journey. It's also written, and my final chapter is written as a caregiver's guide for someone who is caring for a loved one who is navigating this space, which is very, very challenging. So I felt like my young children, all that time that I was in bed, nobody knocked on my door and asked, hey, can I take your children to the park? Can I bring you a meal? Can we check on you? Is there anything that we need? We didn't have that. I didn't have any of that resource. I felt like we were doing it alone. And my children really needed somebody to help take care of them. I needed somebody to help take care of me. And it was rare to have that resource available. So this book is written for the individual who is navigating uncharted territory and predominantly on their own. But even if they do have immense support, there's an enormous amount of tools that I put in this book, everything from nutrition to different healing modalities. And all of the healing modalities that I put in that book are written in a way that you become the ownership. You become the student and the master simultaneously. You take ownership on, okay, if I'm going to navigate this, I'm in charge. And we have felt like our choices have been taken from us when we are struggling in our experience, a traumatic experience. But we get to be the owners of our fate, and however you want to engage or whatever. And so everything from journaling to tapping, essential oils, meditation, all of these different various techniques to help understand how and why our brains behave the way that we do, our nervous system, our subconscious programming, how all of that influences how we're going to proceed.
It definitely sounds like a book with so many layers where I think regardless if you have physical health issues or if you have trauma issues that you maybe been able to suppress for the past decade or so, it sounds like it's almost a buffet of options and tools, so you can be more informed about what's available and you can choose and try what resonates with you, and hopefully be a bit further in the journey of healing.
Correct. And the nutrition aspect is, I dial in quite a bit on bone broth and the value of bone broth. And for those who are vegetarian, there's recipes that you can find that have using eggshells and root vegetables, and so there's options for everyone. However, I felt like for me, I really like the bone broth, and if you just think about it, as we come back to that natural state of what did mom make us when we didn't feel well? Usually chicken noodle soup. So we all have a little bit of that memory. That's very soothing. It's warm on the digestive system. A lot of the Chinese medicine will put heat in that area. We want to activate heat so that the warmth, soothing. We get the good healthy fats. We get a lot, like I said, the amino acid content. So that's dialed in quite a bit on there too.
Oh, that's good. To be honest, I've been planning to try bone broth for a while now. I've been reading so much about it and it popped up. I always seem to forget it. But now that you mention it, I think it's also a sign for me to actually go to the store tomorrow and pick up bone broth. So I'll definitely do that.
I highly recommend, if you're going, instead of making it your own, it's very inexpensive and very easy to make on your own, and I have a recipe in the book. However, if you choose not to make your own, I highly recommend you get the frozen. It's usually in the freezer section, like a natural grocery store. Those will be more likely. I like the flavor profile of those and the content better than the mass-produced boxed ones. The key is you want to find something that has a very slow simmer over time, because you want it to leach as many of those minerals as possible to give you the nutrition. So if you choose to look at that, the frozen ones in the freezer section are pretty tasty.
Thanks, I will. So I also want to talk about the loss of a loved one, because I know that in the past months you've lost not just one, but two people that were very close and very dear to you. Could you tell us a bit more about how you've navigated the months after?
Yeah, so March 11th of this year, my husband and I, our wedding anniversary is February 28th, and we went on a really lovely anniversary trip. And we came home, and he didn't feel well for those few days. He's had some stomach pain. He felt like he maybe got something on the plane, but he's continued to not feel well. His health, again, due to a lot of the trauma that we had, was struggling as well. And that morning, I asked him if I could take him to the doctor. I was getting very concerned, and he finally agreed. And he turned around and collapsed in front of me, and my husband passed. And obviously that was the most horrific thing. He was the love of my life, and I was fortunate enough to have 22 years with him, but our marriage was a fairy tale marriage. We were so madly in love with one another. That grief was immense, and I depended on my children to be with me, and my adult son, who was 28, and my 2 daughters also lived at the home. My son was looking for a spiritual journey to help give him some insight. He was really struggling at this loss as well. And he had learned, and he had, in his own healing journey, he had engaged in a psychedelic mushroom journey. That didn't go well. And in the following day, unbeknownst to all of us, I found my son had taken his life in a very graphic way. I know that it was not premeditated. I know that it wasn't intentional. I think he had a moment where he wasn't himself. And so I want to school people, because a lot of people engage in healing journeys, even like the ayahuasca that I talked about. Psychedelic mushrooms are really, really coming to light, and some people have amazing experience, and not all of them are. And I think being in a very controlled environment, if that's something that somebody chooses to engage in, but it can go bad, and we are evidence of that. That trauma of the way I found my son, layered with all of the other aspects. This was our dream home. My father and I built it together 10 years ago. I recently lost my father as well. And, my father is 2 years ago, but the 3 men in my life, my husband, my father, and my son, it was just too much. And that my home became a crime scene due to the circumstances with my son. So my daughters and I moved into a hotel. And we've been living in a hotel for the last 3 months. I can't imagine going through this experience, and I know that anybody who hears this story also can't imagine. Some things that have been supportive for me is I've been very, very, very blessed to have amazing siblings and mother and tribe. But anybody who knows of someone who has lost a loved one, don't go to them and ask, how can you help? Because their brains are in so much shock, and they can't even make decisions about what to eat, let alone making big decisions. Go to them and do help. Bring a meal. The only questions you have a right to ask is, are there any food sensitivities? Is there anything we need to be aware of? And then bring food. Take care of the children. If you know somebody who has lost a spouse, chances are they have children. Very few people check in on the children. Very few people, and children do not have a network of friends. Like my daughter turned 19 2 days before her father passed. That age, they don't have friends who have gone through that experience before, so they don't have the capacity to hold space. They don't have the capacity to reach out. My daughter, she was at university. She gets the phone call that her dad passed away. She's in so much shock. She walks into her dorm with her roommate, and she says, my dad just died. And her roommate was scrolling on social media, and she looks up and she goes, oh, sorry, and then went right back to a thing. And you just like, what just happened? Check in often, but don't ask anything of that individual. My favorite ones that are supportive, when my husband was very, very well known, he was a beautiful author, beautiful healer. He traveled the world speaking engagements. He was loved by thousands of people. So when my husband passed, I had over 6,000 people reach out to me, which was lovely and a lot. I didn't have the bandwidth to even on social media to hit like. I couldn't do that, but I could read the messages. The most supportive thing somebody can do is, I'm checking in. No need to respond, because it gives that individual freedom, because we feel obligated to respond because somebody's helping us. No need to respond. I'm going to bring a meal at 6 o'clock. It will be this. I'm here for you. And at the very least, If there's anything else, please let me know. Everybody wants to help, but they don't know what to do to help. And I write that a lot in the caregiver's guide. So some basic guidelines. Go pull weeds in their yard. If there's something that if they have a pet, see if they need any kind of appointments, any grooming, if the pet needs to be walked, if they have young children, take them out of the environment and give them a space where they can be children again for a few moments. Take them to a theme park or even just a regular park out in nature. Check in often. And when somebody is experiencing grief, the primary time of grief, there's only 3 things that person can do and should do. And it's sleep as much as possible, but sleep is almost impossible. Those first 6 weeks, I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. I was in so much anxiety. So sleep is very, very dysregulated. Eat gently and often as you can. Your appetite completely disappears. I've lost over 20 pounds since my husband's passing. So bring food that's nourishing, bring food that's soothing and easy to digest and easy to prep so that they don't have to do a lot of work into it, and also bring something that makes them happy. If it's chocolate chip cookies, then bring them chocolate chip cookies. And then the third one is to just move your body gently. Show up and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Can we go for a walk? Just around the block. Get out in nature, get some fresh air, have somebody who's checking in on you, and just, even if it's just sitting in the sun for a little bit, but get out of the home and get some fresh air. So eat gently, sleep often, move your body. Anything else, let the network around you take care of it as much as you can. And then it's been very, very challenging. My life has not been my own. It's layered with my husband had a will that the last page wasn't signed, and so my stepson, who never lived with us, is being very cruel with probate. And so I want to say, for anybody who's in this position, be kind to the wife. They lost their world, my world. So the business is gone, my home is gone, my husband, my son are gone, my identity is gone. So I'm still in the rebuilding stage, but I do have a lot of support, and I'm very, very blessed to have that I don't think many people do. And in the very early weeks, the individual's still in a lot of shock. And so we can't make sense. To think, you could logically say, I know because we buried that individual that they're not coming back, but your brain hasn't caught that up yet. So you keep waiting for that person to come home, and you check on them on week 2, they're fine. Week 1 is so much shock. Week 2 is so busy with funeral arrangements and all of the details you have to handle. And then everybody goes home. Week 3 is where it becomes absolutely falling on the floor in the shower, bawling your eyes out, can't even breathe. You feel paralyzed that you can't make a single decision, sobbing uncontrollably. It hits really hard around week 3. But that wave comes and goes, and it comes in very uncertain ways. And my dad's been gone for just over 2 years, but I'm missing him a lot right now because I'm making big decisions where I would have really required my dad's counsel. So remember birthdays, remember death dates, remember things that are important. Check in on, if a mother lost her child, check in on her on Mother's Day. These consciousness parts of humanity are what's going to keep us all moving forward. And the final thing that I will say about this is, when I started experiencing such horrific grief, I became keenly aware that the world is hurting. I'm not the only one. My story is pretty immense. It's horrific beyond compare, but mine isn't the only story. Humanity as a whole is hurting. So if somebody isn't as friendly at the checkout. I was at an office today. I had to get new utilities, and I'm not my best self. I'm doing the best I can. And if you're working with people who are doing the best they can and they bring death certificates and they need a transfer of things, work with them. I had 3 or 4 times I had people who's like, I could lose my job if I don't do this right. That doesn't land. Don't tell somebody that you could lose your job if they don't have the right piece of paper. Just lovingly say, this is what we need. Is there any way that we can help you get that? That little shift can make or break that person's day.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more, and I think just being kind to everyone that we meet as much as we can, given the situation that we're in, because of course all of us, we have good days, we have bad days, but being your kindest self, the kindest version of yourself that you can muster in any given circumstance, I think goes a long way. Because I'm sure that, if you walk into the bank or in the grocery store today, those people at the checkout counter will not know your background, your story. They will not know the emotions that you're dealing with on a daily basis and the pressure that's under you. So by just being nice to everybody, you perhaps, deal with somebody who's had a really tough few months, and they appreciate a smile and maybe going a bit out of your way to make their experience a bit more convenient.
Yeah, because you're carrying the weight of the world, and when somebody lifts a little bit of that off, it makes you'll remember. I promise you will remember those who showed up, and I promise you will remember those who didn't. My husband's family hasn't checked on us once. They've never checked on us once. They haven't offered any support. I don't expect anybody financially to offer support, but they came to the funeral and never showed up again. And they not only that, they haven't checked on my children, and my stepkids haven't checked on me. I was a very good mother to them, and all of a sudden greed came over, and I think, pain and grief will fester. We all think that we'll be our best self under grief, but nobody is. Those wounds that are unhealed, those dialogues that are unfinished business with a parent or with a family member, when that comes out, it can come out in a really ugly way, and people behave not their best self. So be prepared for that. And if you are in these conversations where you think, oh yeah, we need to update our will, or we need to update our documents, or I need to give you my passwords, or we still haven't been able to access any of my son's documents, find a place to do that and make that a priority. We've all heard that. I've heard that so many times, and for years I would say to my husband, we need to update this, and it would just kind of glaze over. And I think I've been put in this position so that I can be the voice, follow up. And if you have stepchildren, make sure you're protected, because all of a sudden your value goes from level 10 to absolutely nothing. And that's what I'm experiencing. And it just adds so many layers of grief and pain, because I feel like I got thrown away from a family that I loved and supported. So I don't know what God wants from me at this point, but I do know that my husband is proud of me. I do know that my son is proud of me, that my father is proud of me. I do know that miracles are coming into place that I can't even describe, that I have nature support. I know that my loved ones are here, and they'll hold space when I need to cry. And when somebody's crying, don't try to fix it. There's nothing you can do to fix it. Don't try. Just let them feel safe. Don't do what if. Don't say at least as. Don't try to make them think happy things that aren't there yet. Let them just be in this space in a very safe environment.
Vicki, all I can say is I'm so sorry that this path for you is being made worse by things that other people can control. Dealing with grief, dealing with loss is a huge pressure, and as you've said, it feels like your world has ended, but making it extra difficult, and by those that are still alive and not being together but choosing to give in to pain and to remove ourselves from the people involved. Of course, I don't know all the nuances, but I know that you're a beautiful soul. I'm sure your daughters are as well, and I know that you don't deserve this. So I'm really sorry for those that choose not to reach out to you at this time, because I know how difficult, how extra difficult it makes this time for you.
Thank you.
So I will keep you in my prayers, your daughters as well. I'm sure everybody else listening to this will. You're an unbelievably strong woman, and I can imagine you would rather not be in a situation where you're called a strong woman, but you are, and I know that great things are coming for you, and they will be coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Vicki, now for anybody that wants to reach out or wants to have a look at your book, where is the best place to go to?
Yes, so my book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery, is available on Amazon. It's also available through my website to some degree. I'm still in a little bit of transition because I was connected a lot with my husband. We did mentoring together for a number of years and owned an herb store. So there's a lot of transition that I'm still in. I'm a past life regression therapist, and I'm a certified EFT practitioner. EFT is amazing for healing modalities. So more of that can be found on my website, vickiwerner.com. But my book is available on Amazon. And it's also available on Audible as well.
Perfect. So we'll add all of the links down below for people to be able to reach out. And Vicki, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story, your experience with us. And I know it hasn't been easy, but I do believe that amongst everybody that will be watching this, I know that we will help a few people deal with grief and find hope in unexpected places.
Thank you.